Good morning, everybody. Today we're in the Old Testament book of Judges, and we're in chapter 11. And we've talked about how crazy Judges is and how can it get any worse? Well, in this chapter, it does. It spirals down one more level. In today's chapter, we meet Jephthah. He is a kind of a good news, bad news kind of guy. And we find out that he was born to a upstanding Jewish father in the area called Gilead. But the problem is that his mom was a prostitute. And because of that, his half-brothers reject him and they chase him away so that he won't receive any part of the inheritance. The good news is that he lands in this area called Tob. And even though he is ostracized, he becomes a mighty warrior. And the bad news is, though, he becomes surrounded by a bunch of gangsters in this land, and he becomes their leader. And he's sort of like a mafia thug. It's very evident that Jephthah does not know much about the Jewish God. And when the Ammonites, who were the enemies, part of the Canaanite tribes, came and actually attacked Israel, Jephthah's half-brothers remember him. And suddenly the fact that he was born to a prostitute doesn't become nearly as important anymore because they try to recruit him to become their new military commander. But Jephthah needed some clarification. He was a little confused by the whole situation. Let me read you from Judges chapter 11, beginning with verse 7. It says, "But Jephthah said to them, 'Aren't you the ones who hated me and drove me from my father's house? Why do you come to me now when you're in trouble?' 'Because we need you,' the elders replied. 'If you lead us in battle against the Ammonites, we will make you the ruler over all the people of Gilead.' Jephthah said to the elders, 'Let me get this straight. If I come to you, and if the Lord gives me victory over the Ammonites, will you really make me ruler over all the people?' 'The Lord is our witness,' the elders replied. 'We promise to do whatever you say.'" Well, Jephthah accepts this call to become the commander, and he begins. But before engaging in the battle, he wants to talk with the Ammonite king. In fact, he actually tries to negotiate with him to avoid war, but the negotiations ultimately fail. And in verse 29, we read, it says, "At that time, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah, and he went out throughout the land of Gilead and Manasseh, including Mizpah and Gilead, and from there he led an army against the Ammonites." The Spirit of the Lord comes on Jephthah, not because of Jephthah's character or because he definitely knew God, but God tended to choose sometimes the most unlikely people to be to accomplish his purposes. God still uses him, gangster and all, to defeat the Ammonites. And God does, as I said, choose very unique people in very many parts of Scripture. But the story here is not done. It gets far worse. You see, before going into battle, Jephthah makes a promise to God. Jephthah had been greatly influenced by the Canaanites' sacrificial practices. And so he makes this promise to God that he will offer whoever or whatever comes out to the first person he sees, the first thing he sees after the victory. And he will offer them as a burnt sacrifice. Obviously, this is not a promise from God. This is something that Jephthah created. And so when he returns home, after this big military victory, the first person that he sees is his one and only daughter. And he, unfortunately, doesn't recognize that this is a tragic, misguided vow, and it doesn't honor God at all. He feels obligated to continue with this child sacrifice. Now, there's actually an interesting alternative interpretation of what took place. Some feel that Jephthah actually dedicated his daughter to a lifetime of virginity, which of course would have been almost worse than death in that culture, rather than offering her as a sacrifice where she would die. But once again, in this book, it's so polluted with evil. And obviously, the people have strayed far, far away from God. And we see Israel becoming so polluted by the customs of the Canaanites around them that there is even a possibility of human sacrifice. Now, how does this apply to us? Well, as I think about our lives, I realize that it's so important for us to get to know the character of the God that we worship. We know that he is love, and he is holy, and he is just, and he is patient, and he is gracious, and he is so good. And he calls us to trust him, trust our whole life to him, so that we can know the life that he wants to give us. But there are so many other voices, there are so many other gods, you might call them, that are calling for our allegiance. The God of greed, the God of I can do it all myself, just to name a couple. And we want our full allegiance to go to God. And that's why when I think about just several chapters back, we remember Joshua's declaration. He said, you look around and you're going to see a lot of options. But he says, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And God calls us to do the same thing, to trust him and to live our lives in obedience to him. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
If these devotional videos are helpful to you, subscribe to our channel and click the notification button so you know when we post a new video. And of course, please share them with others.